The cargo ship, Horizon's Edge, drifted through the empty black between star systems, its engines humming their usual steady rhythm. Captain Kyle Morrison sat in his command chair, watching the navigation display with tired eyes. 3 more days until they reached the colony at New Terra. 3 more days of the same boring routine he had been following for the past 6 years. Lisa Bennett stood at the communications station, her fingers dancing across the controls as she checked the latest system updates. She had been Kyle's first officer for 2 years now, and in that time, nothing exciting had ever happened. They hauled medical supplies and equipment from Earth to the outer colonies, and occasionally brought back mineral samples or agricultural products. It was honest work, but it was dull work. The alert changed everything. A harsh beeping sound filled the bridge, making Kyle sit up straight. Lisa's hands flew across her console, pulling up the source of the disturbance. Her face went pale as she read the data streaming across her screen. "Captain, we're picking up a distress signal," she said, her voice tight with tension. "It's coming from about 2 million kilometers off our current course." Kyle leaned forward, his heart rate picking up. "Can you identify the source?" Lisa's fingers continued their rapid movements across the controls. She pulled up more information, then stopped, her eyes going wide. "Sir, the signature doesn't match anything in our database. It's not human." The bridge went quiet. Every member of the small crew turned to look at Kyle. They all knew what this meant. In the 15 years since humanity had started exploring beyond their solar system, they had found ruins and artifacts from dead civilizations, but they had never encountered another living intelligent species. Until now, maybe. "How long to reach the signal source?" Kyle asked, his mind already made up. "At current speed, about 6 hours," Lisa replied. She looked at him carefully. "Captain, we don't know what's out there. This could be dangerous." Kyle knew she was right. Every protocol said they should report the signal to Earth and let the proper authorities handle first contact. But 6 hours of light-speed communication meant Earth wouldn't get their message for weeks, and whatever was out there might be dead by then. He made his decision. "Change course. Take us to the signal." The next 6 hours passed with agonizing slowness. The crew prepared as best they could, checking their environmental suits and making sure all systems were functioning properly. Danny Foster, their engineer, worked frantically to boost their sensor range, trying to get any information about what they were heading toward. When they finally arrived, the sight took Kyle's breath away. The alien ship was enormous, easily 10 times the size of the Horizon's Edge. It hung in space like a massive predator, all sharp angles and dark metal plating. Strange symbols covered its hull, glowing with a faint blue light. But something was clearly wrong. Parts of the ship were dark, and occasional sparks of electricity danced across its surface. "Life signs?" Kyle asked. Sophie Grant, their medical officer, studied her readouts carefully. "Their biology is completely unlike anything I've seen before, but they're definitely alive. Some of them appear injured." Lisa turned to Kyle, her expression serious. "Captain, I strongly advise against boarding that vessel. We have no idea what's over there, or if they'll be hostile." Kyle understood her concern. He shared it, but he also knew that if the situation were reversed, he would want someone to help them. "Prepare a boarding party. You, me, Danny, and Sophie. Ben can watch the ship." 20 minutes later, Kyle found himself floating through the airlock of the alien vessel, his magnetic boots clanking against the metal deck as artificial gravity took hold. The interior of the ship was dark, lit only by emergency lighting that cast everything in an eerie red glow. The air was breathable but smelled strange, like copper and ozone. Strange sounds echoed through the corridors. Clicking, hissing noises that set Kyle's nerves on edge. They moved carefully through the ship, following Danny's scanner toward the largest concentration of life signs. They found the aliens in what appeared to be a command center. Kyle stopped in the doorway, staring at the creatures before him. They were tall, easily 7 feet, with 4 arms and legs that bent backward at the knee. Their skin was covered in hard, chitinous plates that gleamed like polished stone. Their heads were elongated, with multiple eyes that tracked the humans' every movement. One of them, larger than the others and wearing what appeared to be some kind of ceremonial armor, stepped forward. "I am Commander Vector of the Krenth Empire," the alien said, its voice translated through their suit communicators into harsh, clipped English. "You have entered our vessel. Explain yourselves." Kyle raised his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "I'm Captain Kyle Morrison of the human vessel, Horizon's Edge. We received your distress signal and came to offer assistance." Vector's multiple eyes narrowed. "Humans, we have no records of your species. You claim to offer help, yet you arrive armed and suited for combat. These are standard environmental suits," Lisa interjected. "We didn't know if your atmosphere would be compatible with ours." One of the other Krenth, a slightly smaller creature with scars across its chest plates, suddenly hissed something in their own language. It pointed at the humans with one of its four arms, its posture aggressive. Vector turned to respond, but the scarred alien was already moving. It pulled a weapon from its belt with blinding speed. The device was sleek and menacing, crackling with electromagnetic energy. Kyle recognized it instantly from his military training. A railgun. A weapon that used magnetic fields to accelerate projectiles to hypersonic speeds. "Wait!" Kyle shouted, but it was too late. The alien aimed directly at Lisa's chest and fired. The railbolt screamed through the air, spinning at thousands of rotations per minute. Kyle watched in horror as the metal projectile streaked toward his first officer. There was no time to move, no time to react, no time to do anything but watch Lisa die. But Lisa didn't die. The silence in the command center was absolute. Not even the hum of the ship's damaged systems seemed to make a sound as every Krenth stared at Lisa Bennett with expressions that Kyle couldn't quite read on their alien faces. But he knew shock when he saw it, regardless of what species was experiencing it. Vector took a step forward, his four arms held stiffly at his sides. His multiple eyes focused entirely on Lisa, studying her with an intensity that made Kyle's hand drift toward his sidearm. The Krenth commander's mandibles clicked together several times before he spoke. "Impossible," Vector said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing catches a railbolt, nothing living." Lisa flexed her hand slowly, examining the burn mark that had already appeared on her palm despite the glove. "Well, I just did," she said simply. She looked at the alien who had fired the weapon, who was now backing away with what Kyle suspected was fear. "I'd appreciate it if you didn't do that again." The scarred Krenth was babbling something in his own language, pointing at Lisa with a shaking arm. Vector barked something back at him, harsh and commanding. The other alien fell silent immediately, but continued to stare at the humans with wide, terrified eyes. Kyle forced himself to move, positioning himself slightly in front of his crew. His heart was still hammering in his chest from watching Lisa nearly get killed. "Commander Vector, we came here in peace. We want to help. But if your crew is going to attack us, we'll leave. Right now." Vector's attention shifted to Kyle, and for a long moment, the two commanders simply looked at each other. Kyle could see the calculations happening behind those alien eyes. The questions and suspicions. Finally, Vector's shoulders lowered slightly, a gesture that seemed like it might be their version of relaxing. "Your female caught a military-grade railbolt with her bare hand," Vector said slowly. "She absorbed kinetic energy that should have torn through reinforced battle armor. She did this without any visible shielding technology or protective field." "Explain." "Artom Stounce 9. Artom Stounce 9 Wine. With weakened by Sen." Kyle glanced at Lisa, who shrugged. "Captain, I'm not entirely sure how I did that myself," she admitted. "I saw it coming. My body reacted, and I just grabbed it. It hurt like hell, but I've had worse." "You've had worse?" Sophie asked, her medical training clearly kicking in. Lisa. That thing was moving at hypersonic speeds. The friction alone should have burned your hand off. Should have, Lisa agreed, pulling off her glove to examine her palm. The skin was red and blistered, but otherwise intact. But it didn't. Danny, who had been silent throughout the entire exchange, suddenly laughed. It was a nervous, slightly hysterical sound that made everyone turn to look at him. "Oh, man," he said, shaking his head. "They have no idea." "Do they?" "No idea about what?" Vector demanded, his voice sharp with suspicion. Danny looked at Kyle, who nodded slowly. The engineer turned back to the Krenth and spread his hands. "About humans. About where we come from. About what we are." "Explain," Vector commanded. Kyle took a breath, trying to figure out how to put it into words. "Commander, I need you to understand something. Humanity only started exploring space about 15 years ago. Before that, we were confined to our home world for our entire evolutionary history. Earth is what we call a Class 1-2 death world." Several of the Krenth made hissing sounds at that designation. Vector's posture went rigid. That classification is reserved for planets where survival should be impossible. Worlds with extreme gravity, hostile atmospheres, aggressive predator species, and environmental conditions that would kill most spacefaring races within hours. That's Earth, Lisa said quietly. That's where we're from. We evolved there. Every single one of us is adapted to survive conditions that would kill most species in the galaxy. Sophie stepped forward, her medical scanner in hand. Commander, with your permission, I'd like to scan you and compare your biology to ours. I think it would help you understand. Vector considered for a moment, then nodded. Sophie activated her scanner and ran it over the Krenth commander, then over herself. She pulled up the data on her display and turned it so Vector could see. Look at the bone density, Sophie said, pointing to the readouts. Your skeletal structure is efficient and lightweight, perfect for your species. Human bones are 3 times as dense. They have to be, because Earth's gravity is significantly higher than what your species evolved in. Number 4. OTAS. She scrolled through more data. Your muscle tissue is optimized for speed and precision. Ours is optimized for endurance and raw strength. A human can run for hours without stopping. We can carry loads that would cripple other species. We can survive injuries that should be fatal because our bodies are incredibly redundant. If one organ fails, others can compensate. Your immune system is sophisticated, Sophie continued, but relatively gentle. The human immune system is so aggressive that it sometimes attacks our own bodies by mistake. We call them autoimmune diseases, and we live with them. We have to, because our immune system evolved to fight off thousands of different pathogens simultaneously. Vector looked at the data, his expression unreadable. This is impossible. No species could evolve in such conditions and develop intelligence. The energy requirements alone would be prohibitive. Vector, and yet, here we are, Danny said with a grin. We didn't just survive Earth, Commander. We conquered it. We climbed to the top of the food chain on a planet that was actively trying to kill us every single day. Do you know what that takes? What? Vector asked, his voice quiet. Stubbornness, Lisa answered. The ability to take a hit that should kill you and keep moving forward. The refusal to give up, no matter how bad things get. That's humanity's real strength. We're too stubborn to die. Kyle watched Vector process this information. The Krenth commander looked at each of the humans in turn, as if seeing them for the first time. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. The suspicion was still there, but it was mixed with something else. Respect, maybe, or fear. You said you came to offer assistance, Vector said finally. Our ship suffered a catastrophic failure in our main power grid. We've been attempting repairs, but the damage is extensive. Can your people help? On our favor, Mentor? We have 2 Kennedy to Reddit 45. Under 5. Kyle nodded immediately. That's why we're here. Danny is one of the best engineers in the fleet. If it can be fixed, he'll figure it out. Then I accept your offer, Vector said. He turned to his crew and issued a series of commands in their own language. The other Krenth, including the one who had shot at Lisa, quickly left the command center. Vector turned back to the humans. My crew will cooperate with yours. But know this, Captain Morrison. I will be watching you and your people very carefully. If what you say is true, if you are truly from a death world, then you are either the most dangerous species I have ever encountered, or the most valuable allies. I have not yet decided which. And, fair enough, Kyle said. He extended his hand, then realized the Krenth probably had no idea what the gesture meant. On Earth, we shake hands to seal an agreement. It's a sign of trust. Vector looked at Kyle's hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out with one of his 4 arms and grasped Kyle's hand. His grip was careful. Testing. Kyle squeezed back firmly, but not aggressively. An interesting custom, Vector said, releasing Kyle's hand. Come. I will show you the damage. Perhaps your Death World stubbornness will be enough to repair my ship. As they followed Vector through the corridors, Lisa fell into step beside Kyle. She was still flexing her injured hand, working the stiffness out of her fingers. Captain, she said quietly, did you see? The damage to the Krenth ship was worse than Danny had expected. The main power conduits had melted through 3 decks, leaving behind twisted metal and fused circuits. Electrical fires had burned through critical systems, and the backup generators were running at barely 30% capacity. It was a miracle the ship was still functional at all. Danny stood in front of the main reactor core, his scanner in one hand and a puzzled expression on his face. Vector had left him with 2 Krenth engineers, both of whom watched the human with barely concealed suspicion. They had been working together for 3 hours now, and Danny was getting frustrated. The problem is here, he said, pointing to a specific junction in the power grid. The energy flow is completely blocked. I need to get inside that conduit to reroute the power. One of the Krenth engineers, whose name Danny had learned was Kelvin, made a negative clicking sound. Impossible. The radiation levels inside that conduit are lethal. Even with full protective gear, exposure would cause cellular breakdown within minutes. Danny checked his scanner again, confirming the radiation readings. Kelvin was right. The levels were extremely high, well beyond what human safety regulations considered acceptable. But they weren't immediately fatal, and that made all the difference. How long would I need to be inside to complete the repairs? Danny asked. The other Krenth engineer, a smaller female named Thix, calculated quickly. Approximately 8 minutes to reroute the primary connections and seal the damaged sections. Then I can do it, Danny said, already removing his jacket. Both Krenth stared at him. You cannot, Kelvin insisted. The radiation will kill you. Danny smiled, though the expression probably looked strange to the aliens. It might make me sick. It definitely won't kill me. Not in 8 minutes. Humans have pretty high radiation tolerance. It's not fun, but we can handle it. Before either Krenth could protest further, Danny grabbed his tools and climbed into the access shaft leading to the damaged conduit. The radiation immediately washed over him, a prickling sensation on his skin that made his stomach clench. His scanner screamed warnings at him, but he ignored them. 8 minutes. He just needed 8 minutes. Working in the cramped space, his hands moving quickly through the damaged components, Danny forced himself to focus on the task. The radiation made him nauseous, and he could feel his skin starting to tingle in an unpleasant way. But he kept working, rerouting connections, sealing breaks, and bypassing the most heavily damaged sections. 6 minutes in, his hands started to shake. 7 minutes, and he had to stop to vomit into a corner of the conduit. But at 8 minutes and 15 seconds, he finished the last connection and climbed back out of the access shaft. The 2 Krenth engineers stared at him in horror. Danny's skin was red and slightly blistered, and he was sweating heavily. He felt terrible, like he had the worst flu of his life. But he was alive, and the repairs were done. Power flow restored, Thix said, her voice barely audible as she checked her instruments. Full capacity returning to the main grid. Danny grinned weakly, then promptly sat down on the floor before his legs gave out. Told you I could do it. Sophie's going to yell at me when she finds out, though. She hates it when I do stuff like this. Kelvin approached Danny slowly, scanning him with a Krenth medical device. The alien's mandibles clicked rapidly as he read the results. Your cellular damage is extensive. You should be dead or dying. How are you still conscious? Human regeneration, Danny explained, his breathing slowly returning to normal. My body is already starting to repair the damage. Give me a few hours and some anti-radiation meds from our ship, and I'll be fine. Give me a week, and you won't even be able to tell this happened. The Krenth engineers exchanged looks that Danny couldn't quite interpret. Then, Kelvin did something unexpected. He reached out with one of his forearms and carefully placed it on Danny's shoulder, a gesture that seemed almost protective. You are insane, Kelvin said, but you are also very brave. Thank you for helping us. Meanwhile, in the medical bay, Sophie was having an equally strange experience. Several Krenth warriors had been injured in whatever accident had damaged their ship, and Vecthor had asked if the human medic could examine them. Sophie had agreed, curious to see how alien biology compared to human physiology. What she found was both fascinating and deeply concerning. The Krenth were remarkably fragile compared to humans. Their organs were efficient, but not redundant. A single puncture to their primary heart would be fatal within minutes. Their bones, while strong for their body weight, would snap easily under pressure that a human could withstand. Their immune systems were sophisticated but specialized, unable to adapt quickly to new threats. One of the injured warriors, a young male named Vexlar, had suffered what the Krenth considered a serious injury, a deep cut across his arm that had bled heavily before being sealed. Sophie examined the wound and realized that by human standards, it was barely worth treating. She had seen humans continue fighting with far worse injuries. Your regenerative capabilities are limited, Sophie observed, scanning Vexlar with her medical equipment. Your body heals slowly and requires optimal conditions for recovery. Is this not normal? Vexlar asked, his translator rendering his confusion clearly. Sophie shook her head. Humans heal much faster. We have a lot of redundant systems. If one part of our body is damaged, other parts compensate. We can lose significant amounts of blood and survive. We can operate with damaged organs. Our bodies are designed to keep functioning even when they're falling apart. She pulled up a comparison chart on her tablet, showing Krenth physiology next to human physiology. Look at this. You have one heart. We have one too. But our circulatory system is much more resilient. If a human's heart stops, another human can restart it manually through chest compressions. We can survive without oxygen for several minutes. We can tolerate extreme temperatures that would kill your species. Vexlar studied the chart with growing unease. This is the biology of a predator species. We are predators, Sophie confirmed. We're also scavengers and persistence hunters. Humans evolved to chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We can run for hours in heat that would kill most species. We can digest foods that are toxic to others. We eat things for pleasure that contain literal poisons, like alcohol and hot peppers, because we think it's fun. Another warrior, overhearing the conversation, approached them. What is the most dangerous animal on your world? He asked. Sophie considered the question. That depends on how you define dangerous. We have animals that can kill with venom, others that can tear you apart with teeth and claws. We have microscopic organisms that can cause deadly diseases. But honestly, the most dangerous animal on Earth is humans. We're the apex predator of our entire planet. And yet you are spacefaring, the warrior said. You have intelligence and technology. Surely you have left your violent nature behind. Sophie laughed, but there was no humor in it. We're explorers and scientists now. Yes. But we're still the same species that climbed to the top of Earth's food chain. That doesn't just go away because we built spaceships. Across the ship, Lisa was having her own revelation. She had volunteered to help with some of the manual repairs in the lower decks, working alongside a team of Krenth engineers. They were attempting to seal a hull breach that was venting atmosphere slowly but steadily into space. The emergency bulkhead door was damaged and wouldn't close properly. The Krenth had powered exoskeletons that they were trying to use to force the door shut. But the pressure differential was too great. The atmosphere was escaping too quickly. Lisa assessed the situation quickly. If they didn't close that door in the next 2 minutes, the entire section would be completely depressurized, and everyone inside would die. The exoskeletons weren't strong enough. But maybe she was. Everyone get to the other side of the door, Lisa commanded. Now. The Krenth hesitated, but something in her voice made them obey. They scrambled through the partially open door, leaving Lisa alone on the dangerous side. She could feel the air rushing past her, being sucked toward the breach. Her ears were already popping from the pressure change. Lisa grabbed the edge of the heavy bulkhead door with both hands, planting her feet firmly on the deck. Then she pulled. Her muscles screamed in protest. The door weighed several tons, and she was fighting against the pressure differential that wanted to keep it open. But Lisa had spent her entire life on a high-gravity world, and her body had adapted accordingly. She pulled harder, her face red with effort, veins standing out on her neck and arms. The door moved. Inch by agonizing inch, she dragged it across its track. The Krenth on the other side watched in stunned disbelief as a single human did the work of their powered machinery, using nothing but muscle and determination. When the door finally sealed with a heavy clang, Lisa collapsed against it, breathing hard. Through the small window in the door, she could see the Krenth staring at her like she was some kind of monster. She managed a weak smile and gave them a thumbs up, a gesture she had to explain later. That evening, the human crew gathered in their own ship to compare notes. They were exhausted, bruised, and in Danny's case, mildly irradiated. But the repairs took 3 more days to complete. During that time, the relationship between humans and Krenth slowly transformed from suspicious cooperation to something approaching mutual respect. The Krenth crew had watched the humans perform impossible feats repeatedly, and their fear had gradually mixed with a grudging admiration. On the final evening before departure, Vector invited Kyle to share a meal in the commander's private quarters. Kyle accepted, curious about what the Krenth leader wanted to discuss. He found Vector alone, standing before a large viewport that showed the stars stretching out into infinity. "Your people are remarkable, Captain Morrison," Vector said without turning around. "In 3 days, you have shown me things I did not believe possible. You have changed my understanding of what life can be." Vec. Kyle joined him at the viewport, keeping a respectful distance. "We're just doing what comes naturally to us. Earth made us this way. Yes, your death world." Vector finally turned to face Kyle, his multiple eyes reflecting the starlight. "I have been thinking about that. Do you know how rare death worlds are, Captain? In the known galaxy, there are perhaps 50 planets classified as Class 12 or higher. Of those 50, only 3 have ever produced intelligent life. Of those 3, 2 species went extinct before achieving spaceflight. Your species is the only one to survive and thrive." "I didn't know that," Kyle admitted. "We've only been in space for 15 years. We're still learning about the galaxy." Vector moved to a table where food had been laid out. He gestured for Kyle to sit, and the human captain carefully lowered himself into a chair that was slightly too large for his frame. The Krenth commander sat across from him, his 4 arms moving with practiced precision as he arranged the meal. "The Krenth evolved on a world with gentle weather and abundant resources," Vector explained. "We faced few predators and fewer natural disasters. Our evolution was peaceful. which allowed us to develop advanced cognition early. We reached the stars 3,000 years ago. He pushed a plate toward Kyle. The food looked strange but smelled edible. Kyle took a cautious bite and found it surprisingly palatable. Vector watched him eat something that would make most Krenth violently ill, and shook his head in what might have been amusement. In those 3,000 years, we have encountered 47 other intelligent species, Vector continued. Most were like us. From gentle worlds, with calm environments. A few were from harsher places, but nothing like your Earth. We built an empire through superior technology and military strength. We have never lost a war. Kyle heard the unspoken words in that statement. Yes. Vector's posture shifted, becoming heavier somehow. 20 years ago, we made contact with a species called the Vex Collective. They are not like anything we have encountered before. They are biomechanical beings, part organic and part machine. They assimilate other species into their collective, adding their biological and technological distinctiveness to their own. That sounds like something out of a nightmare, Kyle said carefully. It is, Vector confirmed. The Vex are unstoppable. They adapt to any weapon we use against them. They learn from every battle, becoming stronger and more efficient. In 20 years, they have conquered 17 star systems that we know of. Millions of beings have been assimilated. The Krenth Empire is losing this war, Captain Morrison. We are losing badly. Kyle set down his fork, his appetite suddenly gone. Why are you telling me this? Why? Why are you telling me this? Vector leaned forward, his eyes intense. Because I have watched your people for 3 days, and I have seen something I thought impossible. I have seen beings who refuse to break, who survive things that should kill them, who adapt and overcome through sheer determination. I have seen Death World survivors in action. Commander, humanity is not ready for an interstellar war, Kyle said firmly. We barely have a dozen colonies. Our fleet is mostly exploration and cargo vessels. We have no military to speak of. You don't need a military, Vector said. You are the military. Every single one of you is a weapon that the Vex cannot adapt to, because you don't rely on technology or predictable tactics. You rely on your own impossible biology. Lisa caught a railbolt with her hand. Railbolt with her hand. Danny survived lethal radiation. Your species can do things that break the rules of conventional warfare. Kyle stood up, pacing across the room. You want us to fight your war for you? No. Vector said, and his voice was surprisingly gentle. I want you to fight your own war. Because the Vex are coming, Captain. They expand in all directions. They will reach human space eventually. It's not a question of if, but when. I am offering you a choice. Fight alongside allies who can provide technology and resources. Or fight alone, when the Vex arrive at your doorstep, unprepared. That's not much of a choice, Kyle said bitterly. No, it isn't. Vector stood as well, moving to stand beside Kyle. But it is an honest one. I am not trying to deceive you or manipulate you. I am telling you the truth about the threat you face. The galaxy is at war. Whether you want to be part of it or not. Kyle thought about his crew, about humanity's fragile colonies scattered across a handful of star systems. He thought about Earth, his home, and what would happen if the Vex reached it. But he also thought about what Vector was asking. To take a species that had just reached the stars and throw them into a war they didn't understand against an enemy they had never seen. I need to discuss this with my government, Kyle said finally. This isn't a decision I can make alone. I understand, Vector replied. But I ask that you convey the urgency of the situation. The Vex move quickly. The time for deliberation is limited. The Krenth commander moved to a console and pressed several buttons. A small data crystal emerged from a slot in the machine. He picked it up and handed it to Kyle. This contains everything the Krenth Empire knows about the Vex, their biology, their technology, their tactics, their weaknesses such as we have discovered them. It also contains detailed star maps showing their expansion pattern and our projections for when they will reach human space. Kyle took the crystal, feeling its weight in his palm. It was so small, but it contained information that could change the future of his entire species. How long do we have? Based on their current expansion rate and our knowledge of the space between our territories, Vector said, his voice heavy. The Vex will reach the edge of human-controlled space in approximately 2 years. Maybe less. 2 years. It seemed like a long time, but Kyle knew it wasn't. Not when humanity needed to prepare for an enemy they couldn't even imagine. Not when they needed to transform from peaceful explorers into warriors capable of fighting a war against an unstoppable enemy. There's something else you should know, Vector added. The first time a species encounters the Vex, they always underestimate them. They believe their technology or their tactics will be sufficient. They are always wrong. The Vex adapt too quickly. By the time a species realizes the true threat, it is usually too late. But you think humanity is different, Kyle said. I think humanity doesn't rely on predictable methods, Vector replied. I think you are chaotic in the best possible way. I think the Vex will encounter you and discover that all their adaptation and learning cannot prepare them for a species that survives through pure stubbornness. Kyle looked out at the stars again, thinking about everything he had learned. He thought about Lisa catching that railbolt, about Danny working in lethal radiation, about all the impossible things humans could do simply because their planet had forced them to evolve beyond normal limits. I'll take your information back to Earth, Kyle said finally. I'll make sure the right people see it, but I can't promise anything beyond that. Humanity has to make its own choice about this war. That is all I ask, Vector said. He extended one of his 4 arms in the human gesture of handshaking that Kyle had taught him days ago. Whatever your people decide, Captain Morrison, know that the Krenth respect you. You came to help us when we were in need, asking nothing in return. That is not a common thing in this galaxy. Kyle shook his hand, feeling the alien's careful grip. The next morning, the Horizon's Edge detached from the Krenth warship and began its journey back to human space. Kyle stood on the bridge, watching Vector's ship shrink into the distance. In his pocket, the data crystal felt impossibly heavy. Lisa stood beside him, her hand fully healed from catching the railbolt. You think they'll listen? She asked quietly. Back on Earth? Ofer. Back on Earth. I don't know, Kyle admitted. But they have to. Because, if Vector is right, we're running out of time. Behind them, Sophie and Danny were going over the medical and engineering data they had collected from the Krenth ship. Ben was plotting the fastest course back to Earth. The crew of the Horizon's Edge was small, but they had just become the most important people in human history. 6 months after the encounter with the Krenth, everything changed for humanity. The colony world of New Terra was one of humanity's newest settlements, home to 10,000 farmers and their families. They grew food in the rich soil, raised livestock adapted to the slightly lower gravity, and dreamed of building a better future among the stars. They had no military presence, no defensive weapons, nothing but farming equipment and hope. When the Vex arrived, they had no chance. The distress signal reached Earth 36 hours after the attack began. By the time the message arrived, New Terra was already silent. Every transmission had ceased. Every communication channel was dead. 10,000 people had simply vanished from the galaxy. The response from Earth was immediate and overwhelming. Kyle Morrison found himself summoned to the newly formed United Earth Defense Force headquarters in Geneva. His report about the Krenth and the Vex threat had circulated through every government and military organization on the planet. Some had believed him. Others had dismissed it as exaggeration or misunderstanding. None of them could dismiss it now. The conference room was filled with generals, admirals, politicians, and scientists. Kyle stood at the front of the room, the data crystal from Vector plugged into the main display. Images of Vex combat units filled the screens, biomechanical nightmares that combined organic tissue with advanced technology. They adapt, Kyle explained, highlighting a section of the report. Every weapon the Krenth used against them, the Vex learned to counter within days. Energy weapons, kinetic weapons, biological agents. Nothing worked for long. The Vex assimilate information as fast as they assimilate people. Then how do we fight them? Asked Admiral Patrick Hayes, the newly appointed commander of Earth's defense fleet. He was an older man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many wars. Kyle looked around the room at all the worried faces. The Krenth think we have an advantage. They think the Vex can't adapt to us. Why would they think that? Asked Dr. Linda Chen, Earth's leading xenobiologist. Because we're from Earth, Kyle said simply. Because we evolved on a death world. Because our biology is so fundamentally different from every other species in the galaxy that the Vex won't have any frame of reference for dealing with us. A politician from the European Union stood up. Are you seriously suggesting that we send our people to fight alien monsters based on the theory that we're harder to kill than other species? I'm suggesting that we don't have a choice, Kyle replied. The Vex are already in our space. New Terra is gone. If we don't figure out how to fight them, Earth will be next. And yes, I'm saying that our best advantage is exactly what makes us human. Our durability, our adaptability, our refusal to give up, even when we should. The room erupted in arguments. Some people thought Kyle was insane. Others thought he might be right. Admiral Hayes waited for the noise to die down, then stood up. I've read Morrison's report a dozen times, Hayes said, his voice cutting through the chatter. I've studied the Krenth data. I've analyzed what happened at New Terra, and I think Captain Morrison is right. We can't beat the Vex with conventional tactics because they adapt too quickly. But maybe we can beat them with unconventional tactics. With human tactics. What are you proposing? Asked the Secretary General of the United Nations. I'm proposing we form specialized combat units, Hayes explained. Small teams of highly trained individuals who can operate in conditions that would kill most soldiers. Teams that can board enemy vessels, fight in hostile environments, and use their natural human advantages to their fullest extent. He turned to Kyle. Captain Morrison, I want you to help train these teams. You've seen the Vex data. You understand what we're up against, and your crew has already proven what humans can do when pushed to their limits. Kyle thought about his small cargo ship and his tiny crew. He thought about Lisa catching that railbolt, about Danny surviving radiation, about all the impossible things they had done without even thinking about it. Then he thought about New Terra and 10,000 dead colonists. I'll do it, Kyle said. On one condition. Lisa Bennett leads the first combat team. She's the best soldier I've ever seen, even if she's never thought of herself that way. Hayes nodded. Agreed. Get me a list of candidates. We have 2 weeks to prepare before the relief fleet heads to New Terra. 2 weeks later, Lisa stood in the briefing room of the battleship Earth's Pride, surrounded by 30 of the best soldiers humanity could produce. They were Marines, Special Forces operators, combat engineers, and field medics. Every single one of them had volunteered for this mission after hearing what happened at New Terra. The Vex learn fast, Lisa told them, her voice steady and confident. They've fought the Krenth for 20 years and adapted to every tactic and weapon. But they've never fought humans. They don't know what we can do. That's our advantage, but only if we use it correctly. She pulled up a holographic display showing the interior of a Vex ship. The Krenth fight from a distance with energy weapons and railguns. They wear heavy armor and rely on technology for protection. We're not going to do that. We're going to get close. We're going to use our natural advantages, our speed, our strength, our ability to survive in conditions that would kill them. Our speed. We're going to do that. Our speed. Our speed. A young Marine raised his hand. Commander Bennett, the briefing said, the Vex vessels are filled with toxic atmospheres and high radiation. How are we supposed to fight in those conditions? Lisa smiled. It was not a kind smile. The same way I caught a railbolt with my bare hand. The same way Danny Foster worked in a reactor core, without shielding. The same way humans have always survived. By refusing to die when we should. She let that sink in for a moment. Yes, you'll be exposed to things that would kill other species. Yes, you'll take damage. But you'll survive long enough to complete the mission, and that's all that matters. The Vex are expecting opponents who need perfect conditions to fight. We're going to show them what Deathworld survivors can do. The fleet reached New Terra 3 days later. What they found was worse than anyone had imagined. The colony was intact but empty. The buildings stood undamaged. The fields of crops swayed gently in the breeze. But there were no people, no bodies, no signs of struggle. Nothing. 10,000 colonists had simply disappeared. Orbiting the planet was a massive Vex vessel. A grotesque combination of organic tissue and mechanical components. It pulsed with an eerie blue light, and smaller ships swarmed around it, like insects around a hive. Admiral Hayes ordered the fleet to engage. The battle was brutal and immediate. Earth's ships opened fire with railguns and missiles, scoring hits on the Vex vessel. But even as they watched, the damage began to repair itself. The Vex ship adapted, growing new armor plating that deflected subsequent shots. It returned fire with weapons that seemed to phase through defensive shields, striking hulls directly. This was what the Krenth had warned them about. The Vex were learning in real time, adapting to human weapons within minutes. All teams, prepare for boarding action, Admiral Hayes ordered. Bennett, your team is primary. Show these things what humanity can do. Lisa's team launched from the Earth's Pride in a small assault craft. They wore minimal armor, carrying weapons that were deliberately low-tech, explosive charges, combat knives, and compact railguns. Nothing the Vex could easily adapt to because humans weren't relying on the weapons. They were relying on themselves. The assault craft punched through the Vex ship's hull, using brute force ramming. The atmosphere inside the alien vessel was immediately toxic, filled with chemicals that would have killed most species in seconds. Lisa and her team felt their throats burn and their eyes water, but they had trained for this. They could operate in these conditions for the time they needed. Vex combat units swarmed toward them, biomechanical nightmares with weapons grafted directly to their bodies. They fired energy weapons that the Krenth data said were invariably fatal. Lisa took a hit to her shoulder. The energy burned through her armor and scorched her flesh. It hurt terribly, but it didn't stop her. She charged forward, closing the distance before the Vex unit could fire again. Her combat knife found the weak point where organic tissue met mechanical components, and the Vex unit fell. Her team followed her lead. They moved fast, staying close, using their natural durability to absorb hits that should have stopped them. When weapons fire caught them, they kept moving. When toxic atmosphere burned their lungs, they kept fighting. When the situation became impossible, they made it possible through sheer determination. The Vex tried to adapt. They modified their weapons for close combat. They adjusted their tactics. But they couldn't adapt fast enough. Because humans weren't following any predictable pattern. They were improvising, using their Deathworld instincts to survive moment by moment. Lisa's team fought their way to the ship's central processor, the organic brain that coordinated all Vex activity in the system. They planted their explosive charges and retreated, moving faster than they had any right to move while injured and exhausted. The explosion tore through the Vex ship like a cancer. Without its central processor, the vessel began to shut down. The smaller craft orbiting it went dark. The entire Vex presence in the system collapsed within minutes. Back on the Earth's Pride, medical teams rushed to treat Lisa's squad. They had burns, radiation exposure, chemical damage, and a dozen other injuries. But every single one of them was alive. They had survived conditions that would have killed any other species, and they had won. Admiral Hayes found Lisa in the medical bay, her shoulder wrapped in bandages, her face pale but determined. "You did it," he said simply. "You proved that humans can fight the Vex and win." 3 months after the battle at New Terra, the galaxy had changed in ways nobody could have predicted. News of humanity's victory spread quickly through the Krenth communication networks and beyond. A species from a death world had done what no one else could. They had fought the Vex in close combat and survived. More importantly, they had won. The response was immediate. 7 different alien species sent diplomatic envoys to Earth within the first month. 3 more sent military observers. Everyone wanted to see these impossible humans for themselves, to understand how creatures so fragile-looking could be so incredibly durable. Kyle Morrison found himself promoted to admiral, much to his surprise and discomfort. He preferred the quiet life of a cargo captain, but Earth needed leaders who understood both humanity and the alien species they were now allied with. Lisa Bennett became commander of the new Special Operations Division, training more teams to fight the way her first squad had fought. With courage, improvisation, and an absolute refusal to die. The Krenth were the first to arrive with reinforcements. Vecthor's warship appeared in Earth orbit exactly 1 week after the New Terra battle, accompanied by a fleet of 12 other vessels. The Krenth commander requested a personal meeting with Kyle, and the newly promoted admiral agreed. They met in Kyle's office at the Geneva headquarters, 2 commanders from different worlds trying to navigate the beginning of an alliance. Vecthor's 4 arms moved, in what Kyle had learned was a gesture of respect and greeting. "Admiral Morrison," Vecthor said, "I told you that humans were Death World survivors. I told you that you could fight the Vex, but even I did not fully believe it until I saw the combat recordings from New Terra. Your people are extraordinary." Kyle gestured for Vecthor to sit, and the large alien carefully lowered himself into a reinforced chair. "We did what we had to do. 10,000 colonists died because we weren't prepared. We can't let that happen again." "It won't," Vecthor assured him. "The Krenth Empire is officially requesting a military alliance with humanity. We will provide technology, ships, and logistical support. In return, we ask that your special operations teams assist us in our war against the Vex. Together, we can turn the tide of this conflict." "What about the other species?" Kyle asked. "I've been getting reports of diplomatic contacts from races we've never even heard of before." Vecthor's mandibles clicked in. What Kyle had learned was amusement. "Word travels fast in the galaxy. Admiral, every species that has suffered under Vex attacks wants to know if humanity can help them too. Some are desperate, some are simply curious. But all of them now know that Earth exists, and that humans are not like other species." Kyle stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. Geneva had become the center of Earth's diplomatic and military operations, transformed almost overnight from a peaceful city into the command center for an interstellar war. "You know what's strange?" Kyle said quietly. 6 months ago, humanity thought we were alone in the universe. We were just starting to explore, just beginning to dream about what else was out there. And now we're fighting a war we didn't ask for, making alliances with species we just met, becoming soldiers when all we wanted to be was explorers. That is the nature of the galaxy, Vecthor replied, joining Kyle at the window. You cannot choose the challenges you face, only how you respond to them. Humanity has responded with courage and strength. That is why the galaxy now looks to you for hope. Hope is a dangerous thing to offer when you're not sure you can deliver it, Kyle said. Then do not offer hope, Vecthor suggested. Offer what you have already proven. That you will not quit. That you will not break. That you will survive no matter what the galaxy throws at you. That is more valuable than hope. Their conversation was interrupted by an alert on Kyle's communication device. He checked it and felt his heart skip a beat. Lisa's team just engaged another Vex ship. They're requesting backup. Both commanders rushed to the command center, where screens showed real-time data from the battle occurring 3 light-years away. Lisa's team had intercepted a Vex scout vessel approaching a mining colony in the Ross system. The battle was already underway. The tactical display showed Lisa's squad moving through the Vex ship with practiced efficiency. They had learned from the New Terra battle, developed new tactics, adapted their approach. The Vex were still trying to counter them. But human unpredictability was proving to be the ultimate weapon. One of the human soldiers, a young man named Jake Turner, took a direct hit from a Vex energy weapon that should have killed him instantly. Instead, he stumbled, recovered, and kept moving. His armor was scorched, his left arm was burned badly, but he continued fighting. The Vex unit that shot him seemed confused by the lack of expected result, and that moment of confusion cost it dearly. Admiral Hayes, who had joined them in the command center, shook his head in amazement. 3 months ago, that man was a civilian engineer. Now he's boarding alien vessels and surviving weapons that would vaporize most species. The transformation has been incredible. Thank you for watching. Thanks for watching. It's not transformation, Kyle corrected. It's revelation. We always had this capability. We just never needed to use it before. Earth made us survivors. We just needed a reason to prove it. The battle ended 20 minutes later with another human victory. Lisa's team had destroyed the Vex scout ship's central processor and captured valuable intelligence data. They had also prevented the Vex from discovering the location of the mining colony, saving thousands of lives. But the cost was visible. Every member of Lisa's team was injured. Some had radiation burns. Others had chemical exposure or physical trauma. They would all survive, but they would need medical treatment and time to recover. This was becoming a pattern. Humans could fight the Vex and win, but the victories came at a price. Later that evening, Kyle visited Lisa in the medical facility where her team was being treated. She was sitting up in bed, her shoulder freshly bandaged from another injury, looking tired but satisfied. "We got good intelligence this time," Lisa reported as Kyle sat down beside her bed. "The Vex are planning a major offensive against the Krenth core worlds. We have coordinates, timing, everything." "That's valuable information," Kyle acknowledged. "But Lisa, you and your teams can't keep doing this forever. The human body has limits, even one as resilient as yours." Lisa smiled, and there was something fierce in that expression. "That's what the Vex think too. That's why we keep beating them. They assume we have limits, that will break eventually, but we keep proving them wrong." "That's not what I mean," Kyle said gently. "I'm not questioning your courage or your ability. I'm worried about sustainability. We're building more teams, training more soldiers, but we're also losing people. Not to death, thankfully, but to injuries that take them out of combat. How long can we keep this up?" Lisa's expression softened. "Long enough." "Kyle, I've been thinking about what you told me," Vector said, "about how humanity is what happens when a death world produces intelligent life. We didn't choose to be this way. Earth made us survivors, whether we wanted it or not. And now that survival trait is the only thing keeping the galaxy from being completely overrun by the Vex." She gestured out the window at the stars visible in the night sky. "Somewhere out there, the Vex are assimilating more worlds, conquering more species. Without us, without human soldiers willing to take hits that should kill them and keep fighting, how many more civilizations would fall? We're not fighting because we want to. We're fighting because we're the only ones who can." Kyle knew she was right. He hated it, but he knew she was right. Humanity had been thrust into a war they hadn't asked for, but they were the galaxy's best hope for ending it. "The Krenth want to formalize our alliance," Kyle said, changing the subject slightly. "Vector says other species are interested in joining too. We might be looking at a proper coalition against the Vex." "Good," Lisa said firmly. "The more allies, the better. But Kyle, promise me something." "What?" "Promise me we won't forget why we're doing this. We're not fighting to prove we're tough, or to show off what Death World survivors can do. We're fighting to protect people. Human people, Krenth people, all people. Don't let this war turn us into the monsters we're fighting against. Kyle reached out and squeezed her uninjured hand. I promise. We'll stay human. No matter what. The conversation was interrupted by an alert. Another Vex ship had been detected entering human space. More teams would need to deploy. More battles would need to be fought. The war was far from over. But as Kyle left the medical facility and returned to command, he felt something he hadn't expected. Not fear, or worry, or exhaustion, though he felt all of those too. He felt pride. Pride in Lisa and her teams, in humanity's refusal to back down, in the way a species of explorers had become warriors when necessary. 6 months ago, a Krenth soldier had fired a railbolt at Lisa's chest. She had caught it with her bare hand and set it down gently. That single action had changed everything. It had announced to the galaxy that humans were different, that Death World survivors played by different rules. Now the galaxy was learning what the Krenth had learned that day. Humans were not the strongest species, or the smartest, or the most advanced. But they were the most stubborn. And in a war against an enemy that adapted to every conventional approach, stubborn might be exactly what the galaxy needed. Kyle looked up at the stars and thought about all the battles still to come. New Terra had been the beginning, not the end. The Vex were still out there, still expanding, still assimilating, but now they faced an enemy they had never encountered before. They faced humanity. And humanity, forged in the crucible of Earth, tempered by evolution on a death world, was just getting started. The war would be long and hard and brutal. But as Lisa had said, they would fight long enough. Because that's what survivors do. They survive. Lisa shook her head slowly. We proved we can survive fighting them. That's not the same as winning. This was one ship, Admiral. The Vex have hundreds of ships, maybe thousands. We hurt them today. But this war is just beginning. Then we'll keep fighting, Hayes replied. The same way humans have always fought, by refusing to give up, no matter how bad it gets. Lisa looked around the medical bay at her wounded team, at the soldiers who had survived the impossible. She thought about New Terra's missing colonists, about the Vex threat spreading across the galaxy, about everything humanity was now facing. Yeah, she said quietly. We'll keep fighting. Because that's what Death World survivors do. They were the first humans to make contact with alien life. They were the first to learn about the Vex threat. They were the ones who would have to convince an entire species to prepare for a war they couldn't afford to lose. As the stars stretched past them in faster-than-light travel, Kyle wondered if humanity was ready for what was coming. He thought about Lisa's reflexes, Danny's resilience, Sophie's knowledge, and Ben's determination. He thought about all of humanity, evolved on a death world, survivors by nature. Maybe they were ready. Maybe their entire evolutionary history had been preparing them for this moment. Or maybe they were about to discover that even Death World survivors could be overwhelmed. Time would tell. And time, according to Vecthor, was something humanity didn't have much of anymore. You successfully helped the Krenth repair their ship, and more importantly, they had shown an alien species exactly what humanity was capable of. They're terrified of us, Lisa said, flexing her sore arms. Every single one of them looks at us like we're walking nightmares. Can you blame them? Sophie asked. From their perspective, we're impossibly durable creatures from a death world who can survive things that should kill any rational being. Kyle nodded slowly, thinking about Vecthor's reaction to everything they had done. The question is, what do we do with that fear? Do we use it? Or do we try to overcome it? Danny, lying on a medical bed while Sophie monitored his radiation exposure, laughed weakly. I vote, we use it. Did you see their faces when I climbed out of that reactor? Priceless. Node. But Kyle wasn't laughing. He had a feeling that their encounter with the Krenth was going to change everything for humanity. They had just announced themselves to the galaxy, and they had done it in the most dramatic way possible. The question was, what would the galaxy do in response? The weapons on their belts? Every single one of them? Kyle nodded. he had noticed. What about them? They're all railguns, Lisa said. Different sizes, different configurations, but all the same basic technology. They've built their entire military doctrine around weapons that fire hypersonic projectiles. Kyle understood what she was implying. And you just proved that humans can survive a direct hit from one. Survive it? Lisa said with a slight smile. Kyle, I caught it. With my hand. I don't think they know what to do with that information. Neither did Kyle. Honestly. But as they walked deeper into the alien ship, surrounded by a species that had never encountered humanity before, he couldn't shake the feeling that they had just changed the galaxy forever. One caught Railbolt at a time. Her hand shot out faster than Kyle thought possible. Her fingers closed around the spinning Railbolt, mere inches from her chest. The metal shrieked in protest, heat and friction burning against her gloved palm. Her arm shook with the force of the impact, her boots scraping backward across the deck. Time seemed to freeze. The Krenth stared in absolute disbelief. Then Lisa leaned forward, calm as could be, and carefully set the smoking Railbolt down on the floor at her feet. She straightened up and looked directly at the alien who had shot her. Her expression completely neutral, except for the slight tremor in her hand. That, she said quietly, was rude.